Hello, and today I'm going to be discussing very different news sources with regards to how they present their stories and how it is framing, gatekeeping, and priming. So the first person I want to discuss is Philip DeFranco, and he's currently a very large YouTube personality that branches out on Instagram, Facebook, and is working on setting up his own news network. He has always been a very passionate advocate for well-rounded reporting, and that's something he prides himself in. One thing I did notice is initially the way that he gatekeeps with his stories to start. He has a very clickbaity image and he has a very clickbaity title, and that's something that can really just give people the wrong impression and prevent them from going into his stories. So it definitely can cause an audience that might not agree with it, or anybody on the hyperpartisan side one way or another. It can prevent them from engaging in his stories or leaving comments on his feedback without actually seeing what his video is about. He does prime a lot. I would definitely say that I noticed this with the way that he's informal, but sometimes he'll introduce segments known as Douchebag of the Day, which is reserved for people like Brock Turner, child rapists, people caught with pornography, parents who are caught abusing their kids. But it's still priming. He'll go Today in Awesome, which usually is about somebody who's done this great thing, a hero. So he does use that. And he'll use terms like garbage people. Again, this is in reference to abusers, animal abusers, that kind of stuff. But it's still priming. And that is what it is. As for framing, he does a pretty good job depending on the story. Now, he doesn't give every story the same amount of coverage, and he does have it researched. But I do think he does a fairly good job priming. An example of this would be the XXXTentacion, I think is how you say his name, story, where, a lot of people came out on either side. Some people were like, R.I.P., he's this great person who was doing, charity, and he showed videos of the charity. He showed videos of him doing good things. He showed videos of his fans, like him advocating for emotional responsibility and not letting depression get the best of you, and all the great things that he was doing. But on the other side, he even showed the testimonies and the things that he had said and his girlfriend had said about how he was abusive and all that stuff. So he showed both macro and micro framing, which I thought was really important. And he does that with a lot of issues. But he does, and he went so far even to include social media stuff from the girlfriend who was abused. So he does a very good job of trying to say, this is this side, this is that side. I might not even know the answer, and then offer people to engage in it. He does hyperlinks. So in that sense, he does try to make sure there's a free flow of information for people to draw their own conclusions. And so that's how he approaches it. Now, I did kind of stretch the limits on this next one. I wanted to utilize NPR, and they've technically started streaming their news, but this is one that I really listen to. I have been told by my very conservative father and somewhat conservative husband that it's very liberal. And me being fairly progressive or liberal, I was kind of defensive of it because I feel like it presents information in a very educated fashion. So I went ahead and I did listen and watch their streams for an hour. And one thing that caught me was the comparison of the XXXTentacion that they had in All Things Considered. Now, I did notice over this that they do gatekeep in a sense that I don't think they're available to every audience. They aren't very engaging. Their social presence is a lot less than Philip DeFranco. They do invite people to call in, but it's definitely a much more educated presentation. There's not going to be something there for everyone. And they definitely prime and frame things in a way to appeal to empathy, which is a very liberal thing to do. Studies has even shown that empathy is like one of the things that differentiates conservatives and liberals is an empathy spectrum. So I did understand, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. And it tries to make everything very intellectual. And so with the XXXTentacion, they ask the same question, like, how do we marry the artist with the intellectual and the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde? And they showed a portion of the song, and they were talking to an expert and be like, do you think they were really trying to frame this in a way that was empathy for this artist and the art that he created. And even the expert that they had on the show was like, actually, the portion of the song that you played is an abusive depiction of a relationship where he's going to commit suicide if she tries to leave him, which you could tell kind of caused, you know, a little bit of a setback, and she was kind of taken aback by it because she hadn't thought of it that way. It was, she just figured it was about suicide. So I did notice that there was that kind of correlation. So from my own personal growth in this assignment and looking at different unconventional sources of news, I've come to the conclusion that you need to take in news sources that make you uncomfortable and are vastly different than your own to get a full picture of things. The XXXTentacion, I still haven't decided how I feel on that particular issue. You need to and news organizations need to do the same thing. They need to look at the whole picture to avoid being hyper-partisan. They need to be engaging and interactive and not too intellectual in order to get their message to people of all spectrums. And they need to have something there that appeals to people of all spectrums. I think that they need to link to information. They need to give people the opportunity to draw their own conclusions and engage them, ask them how they might understand it. And it's a little harder with news networks, but I still think it's very, very important to make sure that sources are well-rounded if we're to make it easily accessible to everyone. I would also just advise everyone to get uncomfortable occasionally and evaluate what you're listening to. I will still probably always side with the things I hear on NPR and Philip DeFranco, but go to places where people are having debates. And I'll watch the Tommy Lawrence of the internet. And I might not agree with them, but it's important to take those views in, because if not, you become just as hyper-partisan as people that you disagree with. So that is my discussion on priming, gatekeeping, and framing. And I hope you have a wonderful day.